guys, how's it going? Welcome back, of course, to the Time Bomb channel. Hope all is good in your part of the world. And watch review comparison today between the CRONOS L6005 and then the STEELDIVE SD153, excuse me. So a while back I reviewed this CRONOS, and yeah, time for me to eat some humble pie again. I will openly admit I am still surprised about how much I like wearing it and enjoy, how much I like it and enjoy wearing it. It fits well on wrist and goes well with most of my wardrobe, and the PT5000 movement inside there is off the charts on the time grapher. I'll show you that in detail later, so you don't just have to take my word for it. Issues with it still, the quick release, sort of the on the fly thing here is still really stiff, and I've pretty much given up with it. But overall, I wasn't expecting this watch to be that good. And yes, you're absolutely right. They have contributed nothing at all to the overall design of the watch, as it is a straight up copy. So massive thanks to Rolex for giving us the original, and to these guys for making it price accessible. And when I did that review, the rationale for today's video is that many of you lovely watch nutters said, well, if you're having a look at that, you simply have to look at the value package that the STEELDIVE SD153 offers. So duly listening to you lovely people, there was a sale running at Ali recently, and I picked this one up for £49, and I think that's pretty damn good value. However, buying on AliExpress is a crapshoot at the best of times. I added this 3 times to my basket, and 3 times the price went up and down, etc, etc. This was the lowest that they wanted to charge me. I used some coins to get it down as well, to get the price down also. There are different versions of the same SD153 on the same website at different prices for the same model. If anyone can understand that and understand why, and they want to drop a comment down below to help me understand that, then I may have a prize for the best response. So kicking off with some key speccage. I mean, essentially they're pretty much the same. They're both 40 mils across the dial, but the STEELDIVE crown does protrude out a very long way, as you can see here. So I'm giving that a 45 mils, whereas the CRONOS, slightly more manageable crown, only comes up, but it's a millimeter difference only. North to south, they're both around 47 mils, and you've got some end mail linkage on the end there, which will extend that wrist print also. The STEELDIVE then is a fraction thicker at 13 mils, whereas this one comes in at just under 12 mils. Again, key difference, as I mentioned before, so the PT5000 movement in the CRONOS, and the Seiko-ish NH35 in here. Let me just refocus the camera a second. There we go, just see the two of them slightly better now. So both watches then claim to have 300 meters worth of watery goodness. So I mentioned again, so £49 for this, and then in the last sale when I bought this one several months ago, it was about £152. So for the £103 difference between the two, you could either buy yourself a better bracelet and clasp for the CRONOS, or you could buy yourself another 2 STEELDIVEs. And yeah, that's a pretty tough call. Talking about the clasp on this one, let's just compare the two. Let me just close that one back up again. So the STEELDIVEs is more ornate, shall we say, because it features their Ninja Turtle logo on there engraved, and then obviously the branding. The CRONOS then is just simply, very plain. But you will notice as well that the clasp on the STEELDIVE is much thicker, and that's simply because they're both 20 mil lugs. But as you can see, the CRONOS has quite a significant taper. I think it's down to around 17-18 mils, so quite a significant taper, so that enables them to have a slimmer clasp, whereas the STEELDIVE, there's no taper on there at all. It's 20 all the way down, thus having that bigger one there. Lengthwise, I think the CRONOS is a fraction longer on the bottom of your wrist. Also to note on these then that the CRONOS comes with screw pins for strap adjustment, whereas sadly, but probably understandable for the price, you get push pulls, or awful push pulls on the STEELDIVE. With regards to tolerances in the bracelet, the STEELDIVE is much looser. I think because the gappage between everything is much bigger. It's just a lot bigger and janglier. This one is jangly, but you know, if Jingle Bells were a competition, I think the Steel Dive is winning just by a very small margin. I've had this one for a couple of months, so I've been wearing it regularly, and I mean I'll stick up some close up shots, but you can pick it up there. I mean, there is no coating whatsoever on the stainless steel of this one, and it is an absolute ding magnet. And CRONOS, if you're watching, if you're trying to put out a slightly more quality product, then I really think that that's something that you guys should be considering, is putting some kind of coating on that steel just to make it last longer than 6 months before it looks like you know, an absolute ding magnet. The Bullseye, Cyclops, date magnifier, whatever you want to call it. I think, I mean, from my perspective, that the one on the Steel Dive is either more effective or bigger. But you can't probably see it under here, and I'll stick up a close up. I found actually the font on the Steel Dive is bigger than the font on the date wheel of the CRONOS, which is why, as you can see here, it's quite distorted. Obviously it's sitting halfway through, so let me just adjust that so you can actually see the full date. Come on, out you pop. There you go. Yeah, you can see it's just that bit bigger. It's, I think, slightly distorted. But again, maybe you know, certain eyes will really appreciate the fact that that's bigger. But I mean, on there, it's pretty. I think it's slightly clearer on this one. This one, it's a little bit more distorted. There's another reason for that, and that is, again, I don't know if you can see it from here. I'll put up a close up. The rehorts in both of them are very different. So the CRONOS is much shallower, whereas the Steel Dive is more angled and much deeper. Thus, the date wheel, or the dial, even the dial itself, is much closer to the crystal in the CRONOS. Thus, making it, you know, higher up, and perhaps, you know, that has an impact on the focus. Also, again, just talking about the dial, obviously the Steel Dive there, you know, that logo up the top there really dominates the dial, whereas the CRONOS is sort of in a faint gold. And depending on the angle, as you see there, the CRONOS branding almost disappears. It hides back into that inky black dial, whereas the Steel Dive, yeah, it's very, very present. The bezel as well. I was talking about thickness and things like this earlier. Let me just see if I can stick one on top of the other so that you can see the overall impression between the two is that the Steel Dive is thicker. Case body is thicker, the bezel is thicker, and the undercarriage on the Steel Dive, which is on the top, is also much more swollen and deep, which affects how it sits on wrist. Also, let me just throw it on wrist. Throw them both on wrist. I'm wearing my recent watch, the Sterling Fraser. Can't take this off. Absolutely brilliant. Massively impressed, and I'll be doing a follow-up video on this one in a couple of months, similar to the one I'm doing today. You know, so right now I've had it for a couple of months. These are my thoughts from that user experience. I mean, they both sit very well on wrist, but I think if there was a difference, the Steel Dive just sits a fraction there. You can see there's because of that pot underneath, it just pops up a little bit higher on wrist. Sorry, just a second. The next thing. So they both have signed crowns, you can see there. But the difference being is that the crown guards are also different. So, for example, on the Steel Dive, they're much more swollen, and they hold a much greater part of the crown. The CRONOS, as you can see here, despite being all the way screwed in here, almost seems, you know, there's a little bit of gappage here. Whereas on the Steel Dive, it holds it all the way in. The bezel on the CRONOS has the nipple pip up at the top there, whereas the Steel Dive is completely bare. Color-wise, well, the Steel Dive, the green has a slightly more blue hue to it, and the CRONOS has a slightly yellower green hue to it. but you've really got to see them sitting side by side, and in this video they look pretty similar. Now you can just see here it's just a slightly different color green, but again it's really much of a muchness. Talking of the bezels, let's have a go on some bezel action. Let's pop it back up to the top. No back play on that. I'd heard a lot of bad things about the STEELDIVE's bezel, so I was a little nervous, but that action is pretty damn solid. And there is, so it's very difficult looking through the phone camera on this one to get that aligned properly. There's no movement really in that at all. There's a tiny bit, but really I've seen a lot of people complain about those. I think I'm a bit lucky because that one isn't that bad at all. Where am I going next? The Loom Wars. So let's see them together. I think the loom on both of them is very good, but I'm going to give the win to the CRONOS. I think simply because the hour markers on the CRONOS look slightly better and brighter than they do on the STEELDIVE. I'm going to have to throw up some secondary shots of this, of the time grapher. The NH35 performs pretty much like as you would expect, but to me the PT5000 is absolutely brilliant. I was just so impressed with it. It's almost COSC level performance. Really very surprised at how good it is. The packaging, if that's of interest to you, the CRONOS comes in these you know, sort of funny soft bags, whereas these ones come in these slightly cheaper plastic hard cases. I think in conclusion, and it's not necessarily an easy conclusion to make, I think oh sorry, no, there's one other aspect, and that was sized up for my wrist. The STEELDIVE comes in at 164 grams, whereas the CRONOS comes in at 143. So again, quite a difference between the two there. The conclusion, and it's not an easy conclusion to make, I think that the STEELDIVE, the value package that it offers is hard to compete against. You can get 3 of these for the price of 1 of these, and at first glance I think most of us would go, well, looking at the 2 of them, it's an absolute no-brainer for the money I would plump for that. However, you spend a little bit more time with the CRONOS, and it's easy to see how the finishing on the CRONOS, how they've paid a little bit more attention to the finishing. Overall, it just looks a fraction better, and I think perhaps as a consequence it has a little bit more finesse. I think then, in summary, the STEELDIVE is the more tooly, bash and crash version of the 2 watches, whereas the CRONOS perhaps a little dressier of the 2, if that's possible to say, because yeah, they really are very similar watches, and until you've actually got them in hand, you kind of like go, yeah, all right. Very interesting comparison. Thank you so much, guys, for suggesting that I did it, because yeah, again, when I bought this one, I had the no date version in, and you know, I was so surprised about the difference between the two watches within the same company. So looking at these 2 here, I mean, yeah, the STEELDIVE is a brilliant package, and yeah, for 49 quid, you're getting a hell of a lot of watch. This one, you know, does it warrant, you know, being triple the price? I think if you can pick one of these up for 100, then you're getting an absolutely brilliant watch, and I think that's one of the reasons you're getting the brilliant watch is because of the movement and its performance. All right, guys, thanks to you for watching all the way through to the end here, and yeah, look forward to your comments as always down below, and we'll catch you all in the next video. Cheers, guys. Thank you.